make sure that you can control any investment that you have through a downturn. Make sure that you have the reserves for that, at least 6 months of reserves. Make sure that the property makes sense from day one.
Welcome to the Freedom Point Real Estate Podcast, where we talk about creating more time freedom through passive real estate investing. Passive investing in real estate challenges conventional investment wisdom. We are passionate about learning and sharing resources with others who are ready to transform their investing mindset. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice, not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer, ADP. I'm glad you're here. Now let's dig in. All right. Well, welcome back, Freedom Point podcast listeners. Thank you again for jumping into another episode of the Freedom Point. We're so glad you're here with us today. I have another amazing guest with me today, Rich Fettke. Rich, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to chopping it up with you here today. Just a little quick bio on Rich. Rich is the author of a book called The Wise Investor. He is also a licensed real estate broker, active investor, and co-founder of Real Wealth, which is a real estate investment group that helps, get this, over 60,000 plus members improve their financial intelligence, secure passive income, and obtain financial freedom. Rich, I know there's a lot to unpack there. I know that you have a lot more, background in real estate than what I've, kind of laid out for the listening audience here. So maybe you can kind of help us go back to, Rich 20 or 30 years ago, how you got started in the business, why you got started in real estate in the first place, and maybe bring us up to today.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was getting into real estate through desperation. Honestly, it was, I had a book 20 years ago. I signed a book deal with Simon & Schuster for a book called Extreme Success. And at the time, I was a business and personal coach and a speaker. And I was just feeling on top of my game. I was 35 years old and everything was just rocking and doing great. My wife and I had 2 young daughters. And then I was diagnosed with a melanoma, which is skin cancer, so most advanced form of skin cancer, which is not always the worst thing. You can get it surgically removed, but the doctors had me do a CT scan and they saw 4 masses on my liver. So after multiple tests after that, from an ultrasound to finally a PET scan, one of the oncologists told me that I probably had 6 months to live. So it was a false diagnosis. It was a misdiagnosis. It was the PET scan that found out that I was cancer free after I had the surgeries to remove it. But in that waiting for about more than 2 months, waiting for these different tests and getting that good news, it was a tough time. It was a really tough time. My wife was a stay-at-home mom at the time with our 2 young daughters, and she didn't know what she was going to do to make ends meet if I died. So it was Kathy who was the one who rallied, and it was the impetus for her to seek out what she could do for to make the finances work. And she discovered real estate investing. We were both coaches at the time. She had a small radio show in San Francisco, and she was coaching just a couple of clients from home as a stay-at-home mom. And then once a week, she'd go into this radio show and do that. So she pivoted from personal development on that radio show to wealth and finance. And she found out that most of her guests who were financially successful had made their money through real estate investing and through business. So she came home. She's like, I know what I can do. And she became a mortgage broker. She started to go down that path. Then when we got the good news, the blessing that I was cancer free, that's when we really pivoted and we really focused on building our own real estate portfolio. So we never had to worry about money again.
Yeah, that's great. And it's interesting that you had that wake up call in your life. It's amazing the type of story too that people are able to tell, after they go through an experience like that. Obviously, in your case, it was tested to be a false test, really. But there's other people that weren't so lucky, but were able to survive and come out on the other end of that. With a whole new renewed focus on life, a whole new list of priorities in terms of what is important to them. So Appreciate you sharing that. Now, I also know one thing about you, and that is that I know that you have a journey or a background in owning a successful health club franchise, right? So
Yes.
maybe talk to us a little bit about, that kind of point in your life, how you were able to build it up to the point in which it was, and then what kind of caused you to exit and pivot, back into real estate.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. So I was young and scrappy. I was 23 years old, and I was a competitive bodybuilder. And this is back in Boston, where I used to live. And I was actually wanted to be sponsored by the gym that I was at, and I went into them and said, "Hey, can I have a free membership?" Because I wasn't making much money at the time. And they said, "No, we don't do that." And I said, "I bought so many members to this gym. I can't believe it." And they said, "No, we don't do that." So I started to go to other gyms and do the 1 week free or sign up for a 1 month membership. And I was with my training partner looking around at these different gyms saying, this gym is great for this. This gym has a great snack bar. It has great equipment. And we said, wouldn't it be awesome to pull it all together and just create our own gym? And we did. I had the spark of an idea. My parents co-signed on the loan for us, and so I teamed up with two of my buddies, and we opened up a gym, World Gym franchise, and we ended up growing that over 7 years from four of us in the beginning, three partners and one employee, to 24 employees by the time I exited, and I just sold my percentage of the business. And the reason I sold was because I wanted to move to California. I had this dream of living in California my whole life, ever since I was 12 years old and into skateboarding and then getting into bodybuilding, of course. So I had this desire to move out to California. So that's why I exited that business. But lots of education from that, lots of learning. I got my business degree in the process, going to night school, but running a team of people and learning how to put systems and processes in place into a business was just massive learning for me as a young guy.
Yeah, I'm sure you learned quite a bit going to business school, but I'm sure you learned a lot more, like 10x
Yeah,
more,
absolutely.
actually being the guy running the business. So that's interesting.
Hmm.
Everybody that gets into real estate, unless they're obviously born into it, maybe their parents are in it, that's kind of their why, so why they got into real estate. What would you say is kind of Rich's why as to why you decided to pivot, into real estate? Was it because your wife was already in the space before? Did you see, some type of a vision of, growing wealth in that way? Was it the, tax benefits associated with it? What was kind
Yeah.
of your major why?
It was almost an accidental why. Most things in my life are very purposeful, like that gym. It's like, I want to open a gym and I'm going to learn everything I can about it. This one was, Kathy and I had bought our first house back in 1997, and it was in the San Francisco Bay Area. And it was more of a house than we could afford. But when we looked at that house, we saw that the whole lower level, we could convert that into separate rental units. So we lived on the top floor, and we converted the two downstairs units that had their own entrances into two small apartments. We turned one that had a laundry room, and we turned that into a kitchen and a bathroom, and then the other one was already set up as a granny unit. So we had a triplex, if you will, when we first got married, and we learned the power of being landlords and the income from that and being able to afford that mortgage payment. And then since that was 97, the market just kept getting better and better and better. And that property appreciated over $100,000 every year for the next 5 to 6 years. And all of a sudden, we had all this extra equity. So we did a cash out refi, and we took that money, and that's what we used to go and really. And then after then, well, actually, it was later than that. We were in there for a while, but we did that cash out refi, and then we went to Dallas, Texas, and we bought 5 investment properties. And so that was kind of like all that kind of tied together with Kathy as a mortgage broker, us investing and putting a small portfolio together. And then we started helping other people do the same thing. That's when we said, let's create something where we can help people invest and get and do what we're doing. And that's when we formed this company called Real Wealth. And so that's the one that now actually we're up to 75,000 members. I got to update my bio, but it's just been an amazing journey helping people build their own portfolios.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to get to the real wealth in just a little bit here, but I did want to ask you a question because not a
Yeah.
lot of people that I have on as guests of this podcast were actively in real estate during the global financial crisis. Okay.
Hmm.
So I know you got started into real estate back in, it sounds like, the late 90s. So what did, 2007, 8, 9, what did that period look like for you, and how were you able to weather the storm?
We didn't weather it well. It was really, really tough for us. We did not take our own advice. We were telling people, sell your high priced rentals in California and move that money and 1031 exchange it into rentals that are going to cash flow and appreciate in these markets. And we kind of, Kathy interviewing people on her radio show, she had Robert Kiyosaki on her radio show back then. And he even said, get out of California, go to places like Texas, emerging markets. So we were advising people to do that, and people took our advice, but we held on to a couple of our high priced California rentals, and then we got really crushed with that. And then we also had some very high leveraged, that was the year, those are the days of those Nina loans. Remember those? And no income, no assets. And you could put zero down. Sometimes you even got money back when you would get a loan back then. They
Right.
didn't verify anything. And so we overextended ourselves. We were over leveraged. We had a lot of properties, but then when real estate prices tanked and we had to refinance some properties out of a construction loan, and we couldn't do that after Lehman Brothers collapsed, and lending just froze back then. So it really crushed us. So we had some foreclosures. We had to do some short sales on those California properties. And it really, really hit us hard. And so we learned some massive lessons that we share with people today about make sure that you can control any investment that you have through a downturn. Make sure that you have the reserves for that, at least 6 months of reserves. Make sure that the property makes sense from day one. We had a bunch of negative cash flow properties that were, they were negative a couple $100 every month, but that adds up when you have a large portfolio. And then when things go south, then it really adds up and starts scrambling. So it hit us hard. We learned some massive lessons and carry those lessons forward to today. So, and hopefully we're helping educate people to not make the same mistakes we made.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I talk to investors oftentimes that, they compare one investment over another based upon, what the IRR or the equity multiple is. But the reality is, you can really juice the IRR and the equity multiple on a deal if you take a lower leverage loan. Well, is a lower leverage loan really the right decision, at this
Right.
particular stage in the economic cycle? And obviously nobody
Right.
has a crystal ball, and, banks were willing to lend out a lot more back in 2001. But now that some of those, floating rate bridge loans are coming due in 2024, we're really able to find out which operators, weren't quite de-risking the deals in the way that they said that they were. And obviously they're just, over leveraged and need liquidity to be pumped into those opportunities, or they're faced to turn the keys over to the bank. So really appreciate you
Yeah, that's very
highlighting that.
sad.
Yeah. And on the education side, I mean, I think this is a great time, Rich, for us to kind of bring up your book that you wrote, The Wise Investor.
Mm.
My question would be for you is, for those in my listening audience, I highly recommend that you check out Rich's book. And full disclosure, I have not read it, but I know enough about it, I would say, to be kind of dangerous in explaining it. But I would love to know from your perspective, Rich, as the author of that book, what would you say is kind of the main message that the reader of that book comes away with?
I mean, it's a parable. So it's a story that shares the lessons that I've learned over the past 20 years investing, just like we were just talking about some of those things. It's called The Wise Investor, but the subtitle is A Modern Parable About Creating Financial Freedom and Living Your Best Life. So some of the big lessons are about how to create financial freedom, and then it goes into also like living your best life. Real wealth to us is more than just money. It's about having money, but also the freedom to live life on your own terms, to be your best self. So I weave a lot of those years of coaching hundreds of clients into my years of working with people on real estate into one story about this guy he's a 40-something family man. His name is Ryan Brooks, and he's doing his best to make ends meet and to make it work, but he's just grinding. He's got a job that takes up all of his time, and he has no time for his wife or for his kids, or even for his life. And then he meets this wise mentor who is an older guy, and no surprise, he's a real estate investor, a business owner. And this wise mentor starts to kind of teach him these lessons on what he can do to get his life on track financially, how to build a real estate portfolio, how to help his wife grow her business, and all these things. It covers his life over a 5-year period. So you get to see what happens 5 years later through all the mentoring from John, the mentor. Not only does he improve his wealth in ways he never thought possible, but he also becomes a better dad, a better husband. He gets in better shape. So it's kind of like weaving all these lessons in throughout this story that I really wrote. I really wanted it to be a captivating read, something that people would read it cover to cover, and not get to chapter 3 and then go on to another book. So, and I think I've succeeded from my feedback and everything, and all the reviews. A lot of people will say they read it in 1 or 2 sittings, and that makes me really smile.
Yeah, absolutely. And I haven't, obviously, as I mentioned before, I haven't read the book, but already I'm excited because the name of this podcast, after all, is called The Freedom Point, right? And I have this
Love it.
conversation fairly regularly with people that, the objective is not to get rich. The objective is not necessarily financial freedom, right? The objective is really more time freedom,
Love
time
it.
freedom so that you have more margin in your life to get fit, to get healthy, to spend time with your loved ones, your children, right? To spend time
Mm-hmm.
doing the things that you want to spend time on, versus, this concept or idea of working 40, 50, 60 hours a week to fulfill somebody else's dreams.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. Money helps a lot in that. And it's so important. But it doesn't really bring us any more happiness. It just allows us to be able to have that time freedom, to be able to hire people to do the things that you don't want to do. And then so you can focus on doing the things that you really are good at, that you love doing, whether that be professionally or just in your personal life. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And you had mentioned that there's a character in the book, the mentor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now why does in the book, why does the mentor prefer real estate as his main investment focus as opposed to other ways to invest?
Yeah, that's what he prefers. Absolutely. I mean, I look at John Weiss, who's the mentor in the book. He's about 10 years older than I am today. So when I wrote the book, it was kind of empowering for me because it had me consistently think about my future self. Who do I want to be? If I was this guy, John Weiss, in the future, 10 years in the future, what would I say? What would I do? And that was it. It's what I've learned about real estate and why he chooses real estate is his prime investment vehicle is, I mean, everything that we hear about, your tenants are paying your mortgages down, your loans down, whatever type of asset class you're in, whether that's self-storage or multifamily or single families, which is what we specialize in. The tax benefits, he's a businessman. His wife has the mentor is a businessman. He owns multiple he calls them the adventure gyms around. And he was talking about how much he used to spend in taxes until he started to invest in real estate. So he does it for the tax benefits, is a huge one for him as a business person, or if you're a high W-2 earner, same thing. And then just the appreciation over time. It's the greatest wealth builder. I'm passionate about that. I've seen it firsthand over the last 20 years in my life, but also the members at Real Wealth and watching them, what they've created and tracking their results over the last 20, even 10 years to see people become financially free and rave about it and how much they love it. And before they were trying to do that in the stock market and mutual funds, working with their financial advisor. And, the mentor in the book says, I do that too. I invest in the stock market. He goes, but my number one choice is real estate because that's where I've created the greatest wealth and the greatest tax savings.
It would be probably wrong for us not to say that it sounds a little bit like the type of advice that the rich dad would give versus the poor dad would give, right?
100%. Yeah, exactly. I was, very influenced. And, the book is published by Rich Dad Advisors. I think because it is in a line. Actually, Robert Kiyosaki wrote the foreword for The Wise Investor because it is very much in a line of that, assets versus liabilities. But the mentor in this book actually goes a little further than that. He says, he explains assets as anything that brings you income or more time or more happiness or better health. And he sees liabilities as just the opposite. A liability, the way he explains it to the protagonist in the book, he says a liability is anything that costs you money or cost you time or cost you health or happiness. So it's almost like you can categorize things and be like, is this truly an asset? Is this bringing me happiness or making me healthier or bringing me more income? Or is it doing just the opposite? And that way you can start to categorize things in your life of like, I got to take my investment off of this and put it over here, put my attention and my focus over here.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about Real Wealth, if you don't mind. So, since you founded Real Wealth, I believe back in 2003, you've
Mm-hmm.
helped now over 75,000 members improve their financial intelligence. So, what are some of the key strategies or principles that you emphasize in your teachings?
I mean, it's having hard assets, we know is massive. It's like assets that are going to last. Some of the most important principles are that, people like to live indoors, right? And there's a massive shortage of inventory and housing right now, and it's going to be around for a long time. So one of the main things is getting into hard assets is one of those key lessons. Number two, it's choosing the right market. So if you're going to buy these assets, especially residential, make sure that you're in emerging markets. And not only emerging markets that are growing in population, but also businesses are moving there. There's enough people in the metro area. We always try to look for over 1 million people in the main metro. That it's tax favorable, that it's also it's landlord friendly
Yep.
and not tenant unfriendly, but it's like there's some, like we started this company in California and we have not helped anyone get into in California investment properties because it just doesn't make sense in California. It's so tenant friendly and there's so many taxes and in the property prices are so high that you just really can't, you're in negative cash flow like Kathy and I were way back in 2008. So those big lessons that we learned the hard way, we're constantly sharing that with our members. And I would say the last thing is that being able to control the asset through any downturn that's a big one. It's just making sure that you have those reserves, making sure that the property makes sense, and then getting the right type of property. So that's another one too, is really looking at is this asset class or this property going to last for the long haul? And we're buy and hold investors. We don't focus on the 1 year gain or doing flips or anything like that. There's a lot of groups out there that do that really well. We focus on, a 10-year vision. So when we're talking to investors, we're always looking at where is this going to get you 10 years from now? You got to look at it that. So many people look at 1 year returns and they're like, oh, this doesn't have enough cash flow or this doesn't have enough return on investment in year one. But when you pencil it out or you put it into a spreadsheet and you look at that property 10 years in the future, you can see it's number one choice.
Yeah, I know I've heard the cliche saying a lot in the last 6 to 12 months, survive to 25. And I think that was primarily birthed as a direct result of the historic run up in interest rates. I
Yeah.
know you don't have a crystal ball, Rich, but where do you think the market's headed as we move to the back half of 24 and into 25 in the real estate space?
Well, we can see that they're not lowering interest rates yet, right? They're actually bumped them up a little bit. So I think interest rates are not going to lower for a while. I have the benefit of being married to Kathy Fettke, and Kathy Fettke's been on the market, for a while, and she's a co-host of the On the Market podcast with Bigger Pockets, and she's an economist, so she's always looking at market cycles and where things are heading, and she has some amazing mentors who will also help guide her and that she communicates with on a regular basis. So all that added up, I've got her to rely on to be like, where do you think things are heading? So Kathy thinks that interest rates are still going to hold. They're going to probably lower a little bit once we see this inflation start to cool off a little bit. We'll see a little bit of a lowering interest rates, but not a huge amount. It could just be a point or two. That'll be one. But when those interest rates go down, even if they go down a point, you're going to see a frenzy in real estate investing, and home prices are going to start to go up again. And right now, home prices are holding pretty strong. Some areas are still appreciation. Which is just wild. If you said that a year ago, we would have never thought that.
Yeah.
So I think it's still strong, especially single family, where millennials are coming of age now, and millennials, the biggest population right now. a lot of the millennials are looking to get into homes. They don't want to live with mom and dad anymore. They want to have their own home. They want to have kids. They want to have a family. And there is a massive shortage of, I think it's over 5 million homes right now. So real estate is going to be solid. Prices are not going to drop. There's not going to be a crash like some of the fear mongers are saying to get you to click on their videos and all that. So I think it's going to be a solid investment. And I don't think there's going to be a big crash. I don't think there's going to be a bloodbath in residential real estate. I think we could see something different in commercial real estate, but it all depends on what happens with these, like you were saying, the short term, the bridge loans. If people didn't lock in a rate lock and pay for that rate lock, we could start seeing a lot of challenges in commercial real estate where there could be some really good opportunity in a year or two.
Yeah, and depending upon the market, obviously, that as a big part of it is the location. Usually, we don't find necessarily that the operators, are distressed from an operations perspective, but we see the financial distress, right? And so,
From the interest is amazing. I mean, their interest has doubled. Their payments have doubled from when they started and what they had their projections, right? So it's hard to make that work.
yeah, absolutely. Well, what's kind of next for Rich? Either personally or professionally. What are you most excited about? For the back half of 24?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I just turned 60. We have two grandchildren. So we've got a four-year-old and a 4-month-old granddaughter. And so enjoying that, which is awesome. My main focus business wise, and Kathy and I are writing a book right now for Bigger Pockets it's called Scaling Smart. It's about how to scale your company or real estate portfolio, whatever it is, how to scale it the smart way. Which is a lot of lessons we're talking about now, and how to really create a self-managing business where your team is really running things. So that's been my focus at Real Wealth. We're a small company. We only have about 25 employees, but it's really about empowering that team of employees to really run things. So Kathy and I can focus on our grandchildren, focus on passion projects, focus on writing books and speaking, doing podcasts like this. So that's been my main focus.
Yeah, it's a great way to give back. Obviously a book can last for a long time, right? It can really live on. And of course, these podcasts are great places to kind of, teach other people, provide value to others that can also, long withstand, you and I on the face of this planet, right?
Absolutely. I've learned so much from podcasts, listening to so many and books and all that. Absolutely. Yeah, it is a great give back.
So other than, listening to podcasts, obviously, checking out your book and the future one coming out here, if I was a brand new investor, had never invested, as in commercial real estate, ever, where would be the first place that you'd recommend I go to start to get educated?
It really depends on where you want to focus. Obviously Bigger Pockets is an amazing community, and but it tends to be a little bit more focused on the do-it-yourselfer. And a lot of people there, it's a kind of a younger crowd, people who want to go out there and they want to scour the market, scour the MLS, find an agent, find a property, fix it up. They have that time and the energy to do it. So Kathy and I, and at Real Wealth, our focus is on busy professionals just like you help. And it's really about how can you do it with less effort and simplify the process. So, and that's been our whole focus. So, the Real Wealth Show, Kathy's podcast, is phenomenal. I think the On the Market podcast at Bigger Pockets is also great if you want to really look at what's going on in the market, where are things moving, what's next. That's where their discussion and podcasts like yours. It's just like there's so much amazing education out there. It's great. It's like so much different than 20 years ago when we got started.
Yeah. Well, I really struggle. I struggle with one thing in my life, and that is these earbuds that sit inside my ears. I follow lots of different podcasts, and it almost seems like there's just not enough time in the day, the week, or the month, to get caught up on all the.
There's so much content. Yeah.
So, well, that's great. We'll put some of those recommendations in the show notes for this episode. Rich, awesome. Where would be one or two different places that our listening audience can learn more about you and to connect with you if they want to learn more?
Sure. Our main website, which has, it's from day one, 20 years ago, and 21 years ago, we put a flag in the ground that we were the anti-guru, and we never sold any education. So we've produced almost 1,000 free webinars. All of our education and everything on our website is free. So I think that's a great resource. So realwealth.com is our main website. And then for me, it's just on social media. It's just at Rich Fettke. Pretty easy. I don't think there's another Rich Fettke in the world, so it makes it easy.
Yep. And that's with 2 T's in Fettke.
Yes.
All right, great. Well, Rich, really appreciated having you on the show with us today.
Thank you. Appreciate being on.
Yeah, absolutely. And listening audience, thank you again for jumping into another episode of The Freedom Point. We look forward to having you join us on the next episode.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the Freedom Point podcast, powered by Starting Point Capital. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decision, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the Freedom Point podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. If you're interested in connecting, you can find contact information at startingpointcapital.com.